I just want to welcome you to our latest podcast of
Life in Stereo with your host Stephen Stone and co-host Steve Gibbons.
Right, Brian. I'm just a co-host. I get him his water, his coffee, he's the star of the show
There
along
you
with
go. That's
yourself
right.
today. Uh, Before we start with our special guest, I just want to mention we're coming to you live from the individual advocacy group Bloomingdale Day Training Center. Steve comes here every day for services,
Yep.
and I'm a 20-year plus employee. And for any other information about our agency, please log on to www.iagcares.org. And our special guest today, Bryan Bassett, is a current member of one of my all-time favorite bands. I got the shirt on,
There you go.
Foghat. I love Foghat. And if we were to read, which we'll do a little bit of that, of Bryan's resume, including Foghat, it would take up our whole 30 minutes plus. I mean, this man is a professional musician with a capital M. So again, Bryan Bassett, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to come on our podcast. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And you're born in, 1953 in Pittsburgh. Are you a big Steelers, Penguins?
Oh yeah, black and gold as we call it. Yep, through and through.
Right. I thought that was always pretty cool that they coordinate all the color. Every team has the black.
Yeah, and makes it easy to recognize a fellow fan in the airport.
Right. So when did you start your musical career? Before we talk about the first band, Wild Cherry, but where were your real roots?
Well, really, I started, like a lot of musicians my age, with the Ed Sullivan Show, broadcasting all the great bands and the Beatles, the Stones,
Okay.
the Kings, the Doors, and that was like a weekly ritual. And I think everybody, my age guitar players probably started with a tennis racket and stood in front of a mirror and pretended to play guitar. And then one Christmas, I was wanting a guitar. I got Santa Claus brought me one, and I still remember it as a big red Harmony Rocket One, and that was the best Christmas ever. My mother hired an Italian gentleman who was a big band guitarist named Jerry Condorado, who used to drive a little Rambler, come to my house. My mother would chase my sisters out of the room, and I would have lessons every week. So that was the beginning of my playing. As I got into my teens, I started hooking up with some of my friends at school, and had several, little bands that we played coffee houses, teen dances before I was of age to play the drinking establishments, and of course
Who
I did.
played
Once
the
I got to be
harmony?
17 or 18, they let you in to play. So,
Who
but
played
that
the
was
harmony? That wasn't Alvin Lee's guitar, no?
no, his was a Gibson 335, but it was very similar. It was sort of a cheaper brand copying the Gibson's line of guitars in a way.
Okay.
So it was very similar as a hollow body, electric, and the same color actually.
Okay.
And, but what was great about the area I grew up in, which was the Pittsburgh area, but we always call it the tri-state area, the musicians, because it included West Virginia and Ohio. So between those, those three states, there were dozens of colleges to play, and literally, dozens, if not hundreds, of clubs to play that were featuring live music 4 days, 5 days a week. And so I was 4 or 5 club bands, different names and different members, but we were playing, like 4 or 5 nights a week, and learning our craft, and learning our, how to play. And we got very adept at learning whatever was on the top 40, learning songs, because we played mostly cover music.
Okay.
And then when I got into Wild Cherry eventually, we started adding original material into the set. And as did a lot of the other bands coming out of our area, there was a lot of great musicians and a lot of great original music. There was almost like the Seattle scene years later, with all the great bands coming out of there.
You had a question, Steve, about Wild Cherry?
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Wild Cherry was formed in Steubenville, I believe.
That's right. Our lead singer was born in near Steubenville, a little town called Mingo Junction. So technically, that was the base of our band, Steubenville. and
Okay.
which is just down the highway from Pittsburgh and also near Weirton, West Virginia. And but yes, Rob Parissi was the leader of the band
Okay.
from Steubenville, Ohio. Ronnie Beidel and I were from Pittsburgh, and Alan Wentz was our bass player, who happened to be, he's from Detroit, but he happened to have a car breakdown in Weirton, West Virginia, and had to get a job to fix his car so he could get back home. And we snagged him along the way. You know, he came to one of our auditions for bass players, and he was great. And so he
And
ended up staying in our neck of the woods.
and I believe you guys were on Saturday Night Special years ago.
Yeah, we did a lot of the TV shows back in the day. We did Don Kirshner's rock concert,
Of course, that's a big one.
That's a big one,
Soul
yeah.
Train, and
Okay, wow. Yeah, because that
what
kind
else?
of fit
Midnight,
all the categories, that song.
right? Yeah, Midnight Special. We were on the Dinah Shore show, the Merv Griffin show. So that was
Wow.
something
Yeah,
we
I
did
never
back in.
knew till I read about you that you were in that band, play that funky music,
That was
and
the big
I
one.
mean that's huge, that's
It was it's such a fun thing to happen to a young musician, a young bunch of musicians. That was my first time in a professional recording studio making that record, and we got picked up by a label. We recorded it at Cleveland Recording Studios in Cleveland. A local promoters, the Belkin brothers, were starting a custom label for Epic Records, and they wanted to find, well, Play That Funky Music is about us being a rock band turning into a rhythm and blues band, and so they were starting a label with that kind of funk music basis. And their one of the representatives came, saw us in the studio while we were recording, signed us, and then put us on Epic Records. And before you know it, a couple months later, we had a #1 record, which, we did the Chinese fire drill where you pull your car over when you hear yourself on the radio, jump out of the car and run around in circles.
Was it one of those things?
that's pretty cool. That's a huge song. I mean, that's
Yeah, and I mean, we were
Probably
just,
that's
yeah, we
everything
wanted to
Wild
make a
Cherry was
45.
remembered for.
right.
Yeah, I mean, we did chart songs after that, 3 or 4 other ones, but never one that big. So if we would have done it in reverse, maybe our career in that band would have been longer. But we had the big one first,
So,
the one hit wonder factor, and
is there anybody that you have played with on those other TV show appearances that you would want to play with again?
let me think who we performed with. Well, we performed with ABBA on Midnight Special.
Whoa!
Wow.
And we did, I think we did the Merv Griffin show and the Diana Shore show with them. So we must have had records released at the same time.
Wow.
And we used to run into each other, and we were always talking, and the producers always came back and said, "Shush, the cameras are on," because we're talking really loud backstage, having a good time. So man, I really remember that. I would love to play with any one of them again. They were so talented.
And when
But
I'm
mostly
sure, yeah.
the bands that I loved were the tours that we did, the live tours. The Average White Band we toured with.
Wow.
We did one of the last Michael Jackson 5 tour before Michael went solo. We did some shows on that
Ooh.
tour. Isley
Wow.
Brothers, the Commodores, Earth, Wind and
Ooh.
Fire. So we played
Wow.
all the great R&B bands back then. So
Wow.
that's like a Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame at this point.
Right. It's like
right.
a
I mean,
Hall
all
of
those
Fame.
bands, I would, and then most of them are still out playing, with some original members. It's
Right.
at our age, there's attrition of personnel, but the music is what carries and keeps it alive.
Yeah.
Now, I read that you worked at King Snake Studio and recorded and mixed over 75 albums and CDs. Can you name some of those that you did that you worked on?
Yeah, I worked with it was mostly a blues label. We were a small roots label, and we were a production house, and that number is probably over 100 now, because I mean that's not a full listing, but
Okay.
I don't even
Wow.
quite remember all of them. But we did Kenny Neal, who's a big blues star right now. He was one of our first artists. He's up for a blues award at the Memphis Blues award ceremony this year. Lucky Peterson, one of the best keyboard players ever, unfortunately passed away. Our first artist on our label. Now, I was an engineer and a session guitar player during this time, and a producer. I produced a band called Smokehouse, which was like a southeastern swamp blues band. Noble Thin Man Watts, who was a very famous saxophone player in the 50s. In fact, he was the band leader at a Harlem club by
Cotton.
Robinson, the boxers, Sugar Ray Robinson, I think that's his name. But I was a real, he was a real famous band leader in New York in the 50s and was from DeLand, Florida, where we were very close to. We were based in Sanford, Florida. And the guy that owned our studio, Bob Greenlee, knew of him and wanted to put out a record with him. He was basically retired at that point, but we sort of revived his career. Rufus Thomas, I did a record with.
Okay.
Alex Taylor.
Rufus Thomas, right?
The name
Yeah.
sounds familiar,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, Walking the Dog was his big
Walking the Dog was his,
Right.
big.
which everybody's done,
Yeah, it was one of the, everybody that played blues played that song. In
Yeah, great
sets,
song.
It's one of those like Stormy Monday. But he was a hoot, really great guy. Let's see who else. Alex Taylor, James Taylor's older brother, was an
Whoa.
R&B singer, and so we did several albums with him. You see, somebody of note, Daddy Kinsey, who was the father of the Kinsey. I can't remember his first name, but he played with the Bob Marley band. But his dad was a bluesman. James Peterson, who was one of the guys of around the Buddy Guys era, and had a blues club in Tampa that everybody played, and he was the father of Lucky Peterson. So we did an album with him. And Rafe O'Neill, the father of Kenny Neal, we did a record with him as well. So we were a small concern, but we had very connected into the college radio and NPR jazz blues stations. So we didn't sell millions of records, but we sold thousands, and we enabled our artists to have product to sell while they were out there touring. And we had a very big following in Europe who were quite enamored with American blues.
Okay, that's great, Brian. Now I see 89 to 93 approximately you were in Lonesome Dave's Foghat. How
That's
did
right.
you connect up with Lonesome Dave?
I was actually working at Kingsnake. I had a quartet called Blue House that we were playing for local clubs, and we were playing in Orlando, Florida. Dave had just relocated from England. He had been on a several-year hiatus from all the touring they did, through the 70s and everything.
Yeah, so much. They were on
He
tour
moved there.
constantly.
Yeah, so he took a couple-year break, moved to Florida, and was looking to get back into playing again. And Pat Travers, the famous rock guitar player and a friend of ours, and a good friend now, but he was a good friend of our bass player.
From somewhere.
Right, Pat Travers, we've talked about him here and there. He's a great rock blues guitar player.
Exactly,
So you've heard us talk about him,
probably,
Steve. Yeah.
I don't know if he played with Edgar. Did he play with Edgar Winter ever? Because I think he.
I'm not sure that he was ever in the band, but I'm sure, we all have jammed with each other at times. And Edgar actually came in and did sessions at our studio, Kingsnake, for one of our artists named Ace Moreland. So, I mean, it's sort of the blues community, has a big mixing bowl. And in fact,
which is funny because it's funny you mentioned blues because we just had Kofi Baker not that long ago.
Right, we just had Kofi Baker on. I think I sent Rose that link to take a look at. Now, I've always over the years loved Lonesome Dave. Sad that he passed away.
Yeah, very
when
early.
with Savoy and Foghat. Can you tell me a little bit about him? Great guy.
Yeah, sure. I'll finish my meeting story, but Pat Travers, was in touch with Dave, and Dave was looking for musicians, and our bass player, Steve Dees, had played with Pat. So I think he brought Dave to see my band, particularly to look at Steve as a bass player. But we hit it off as friends, and we played a very eclectic style of music. It's called, I guess swamp blues is what you would call it, but it was like Lightning Slim, Lazy Lester, all these sort of esoteric blues guys from the Southeast. And that was the primary songs in our set. And Dave knew every one of them. So, he sat in with us. He was practically a blues historian. He was a big record collector of old 78s, had hundreds of records. And we just hit it off on, just the chemistry. We became best friends.
Wow.
And I ended up playing with him. And then for a while, we did a little blues review where my band would open up. Then Pat Travers would come out and play 5 or 6 songs and we would be the backing band. And then Dave would come out and play some Foghat songs. So we did that for, close to a year. And then Dave wanted to start touring nationally again and asked me to join him. And that's how I really became part of the Foghat family. Was touring with Dave back during that time period, 89 to 92. And in 1992, Dave and Roger, who I played with now for the last 25 years, where they were the original members, and at the behest of Rick Rubin, the great record producer, all the original
Whoa.
band got back
Wait a
together.
minute.
Yeah, that's a big name, Rick
Yeah,
Rubin.
yes.
And so he was on Rick, the Foghat was on Rick's list to produce, but he had so many other projects in front of them that they actually couldn't wait any longer and put out a record called Return of the Boogeyman. But
Yeah.
and it was produced, I think, by Nick Jameson, who produced Full for the City record and played bass with the band for a while. So, but it's a shame that Rick never got to them. But I mean, he was doing Johnny Cash. I mean, so many Red Hot
He,
Chili Peppers.
he was doing
AC/DC,
like a bunch of different people.
Right, he was
right, a lot.
yeah, he
Rick
was a very busy
was
guy. Yeah.
producing thing all the time, and so the
Was he
time frame
getting,
didn't work out.
was
But
he
it was
doing
on his
Soundgarden?
behest.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure if he did Soundgarden or not, but he did a lot of people. Rick Rubin. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just prolific producer, and started in rap. I mean,
Somebody was
He was the guy. Yeah.
yeah,
who was mentioning Andy Johns to us that one day? Who was that?
Somebody was produced by. Oh, we had Stacy Blades on. You probably know him from LA Guns, and he
right, yeah,
spoke about Andy Johns did a couple of their records.
right.
So
He is a great engineer producer, and I think he goes all the way back to stuff with Zeppelin and
Yeah,
right,
that's how we know
Who,
him.
and
yes. Now,
so
being that he was your best friend, I'm assuming Lonesome Dave was a great person and everything like that, correct?
he's a very, very quiet man. Me and him roomed together, and during the Lonesome Dave days, just to financial reasons, we decided to split rooms with the band and share. And I think he liked me because we just had a comfortable silence. I mean, we could both sit in the room for hours and not say a word, and it didn't feel uncomfortable. He was a vegetarian, only had a couple glasses of wine here and there. He was a
Okay.
very low key person
Yeah.
until he hit the stage. Then he would go off like a firecracker.
I mean, he was something. He was
Yeah,
just
live he
amazing.
would just like explode, but backstage and his favorite thing to do back in the day was to cruise record shops and look for vinyl records, whatever city we were in.
Right.
And but yeah, he was just a very quiet guy, family man, and lost too soon.
Well,
So
way too soon, Brian, way too soon.
way too
And then
soon.
you joined up with Molly Hatchet. Tell us
Whoa.
about that.
Well, Lonesome Dave and I had toured. One of the last tours I did with him was in Europe, playing with Molly Hatchet. So,
Okay.
so we did and in fact, I think on that particular tour, Rod Price was out with us as well, but we were a five-piece. But we were playing with Molly Hatchet, and I was discussing. I became friends with Danny Joe Brown, the lead singer, and Bobby Ingram, their guitar player. And so when we got back to the States, they knew that the Foghat was getting together with all the original members, and I was essentially out of a job. And so they asked me to join. They said, "Would you like to play, in our band?" Danny, we did a show in the States together, and he said, his tour manager says, "Danny wants to talk to you on his bus." So I went onto his bus, and he asked me to join his band. He goes, "Brian, would you like to join our band?" I was like, "Yes, sir, I would. Thank you."
I'm assuming that was a great experience with Molly Hatchet.
It was, what I loved about it a lot was the challenging guitar parts because we did a lot of harmony guitar parts. I did 3 records with that version of the band, all recorded in Germany. So we spent a lot of time in Europe, particularly in Germany, Central Europe, Scandinavia, Netherlands, and we were signed to a German record label, SPV. So we did 3 records: Devil's Canyon, Silent Reign of Heroes, and Kingdom of 12 are the 3 records I was on. So it was really good, challenging music, really good guys to tour with, and we played hundreds of shows together.
And I'm sure
Awesome. Yeah.
and I'm sure being from Florida, you were buddies with the Leonard Skinner people.
We were, yeah, all the way to this day. We
Nice.
still run into them, and of course, Gary passed, and a lot of the original members passed.
Sure.
Steve Gaines
Yeah.
passed. Just
Yeah, well, due to the horrible plane crash, Artemis is still around. In fact, we're playing with him this week. Artemis,
Are you? Okay.
I think over in Mount Dora, Florida. But yeah, he's left, and Ricky Metlock, who was real famous for Blackfoot, has
Right.
been Leonard Skinner now for several years,
Mhm.
and Johnny, Van Zandt, lead singer, who's the brother of Ronnie. So they're still out there doing it and sounding
Yeah.
cool. But yeah, I did meet them and the guys in 38 Special, the other Southern Rock guys, and we became friends with them. And I'm still friends with them. We still do, Foghat plays with them occasionally.
What about the people from like John Fogerty and CCR and Dave Clifford and
I've done shows with them, mostly with the CCR Revisited. I never
Okay.
really, I think I did maybe one or two shows back in the day, with all the original members, but more with the revival band. But that, once again, great roots music and great music from our era.
I mean, like I'm sure you collected a bunch of CCR records when you were younger.
Absolutely. That was and what I loved about them, especially as a young musician, is, the songs were great, but they weren't exceedingly difficult to learn and play. And they were great crowd pleasers, when would do Proud Mary or, any of their big hits,
I mean, Low Dive would be another one.
sure.
Lodi is a great song. Now, before we discuss a little more about Foghat, I would just want to mention you've had 2 Grammy nominations, 2 platinum records, 3 gold records. What were those? Which bands were those with? And
The most of that's related to the Wild Cherry record. The
okay,
Grammy nominations were both for Wild Cherry. I think one was for Best R&B and then Best New Group of, we were young new group then.
sure.
The gold records are, once again, and the platinum records are the Wild Cherry records. We
Okay.
got a Canadian gold record for that song, and we got an American Music Award that year as well. So yeah, that song was pretty big,
Like
Right, that was
really,
huge.
Right.
Yeah.
especially
And I've been
1970,
associated with other records as a session player engineer that
like
someone told.
especially that's huge for 1972 standards.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Now
we
you've
were.
been, go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I
Sorry.
was going to say we were one of the first bands to have a platinum single. I think there was one or two people before us, and not because they didn't sell the same amount, but I think that's when they started actually giving out platinum records for
Okay.
45s. So we were one of the first recipients of that. Was quite an honor.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
When you guys were doing Saturday Night Special, did you ever get a chance to like talk with Wolfman Jack at all?
Funny enough, I did quite a bit, and and he is a great conversationalist, obviously,
I
but he was
know.
one of the hosts on Midnight Special,
Yep.
along with Joan Baez. I think it was Joan Baez, yeah. And so we were backstage, and here's a funny story. I gave a guitar to the Hard Rock Cafe years ago,
Hmm.
and I found it in Miami. It's in the hotel now, like on a fifth floor in a case. And it's the whole band in the picture except for me. It's Wolfman Jack in the picture instead of me. So I didn't have the heart to tell him. I said, that picture that's been up there for whatever 20 years is
And it's
not
not
me.
you. It's
It's not me.
It's, Wolf, it's
it's
Wolfman Jack
Wolfman Jack.
interviewing the other
Yeah.
guys in the band.
Now you've been with Foghat like 26, 7 years, right?
Yeah, continuously since 1999, 2000 when
Yeah, that's amazing.
Dave asked me to come back into the band. He had been sick, and so they had a year or so off the road. And when he was in remission from his cancer, the band got back together, but Rod Price wanted to stay retired. So Dave called me up, and I was still playing a Molly Hatchet then. And he says, Brian, you want to, he said, I feel like doing some playing. I said, well, yeah, you want me to come over to the apartment when I get home? And he said, no, I want to go back out on the road. I want to tour again. I go, well, I'll have to quit my band. And he said, okay. Mike will send you plane tickets to New York on Thursday. So I gave a proper notice and actually trained my replacement, Molly Hatchet. So for a couple of months, I was in both bands.
Okay.
I was, relearning the Foghat material and then touring with Molly Hatchet until they got the guy up to speed that took my place. And then I started playing with Dave again, and we got about a year into it before his cancer came back and he passed.
Yeah, that's
And funny enough, so when Dave died, I actually played with Molly Hatchet again for a little while. They asked me back, and they asked me back to do the third record, Kingdom of 12. And Bobby said, you have to, if you come back, you have to tour the record. And I said, okay, I will. And And so I did, went back with them for, the record recording and a little touring in Europe and America. And along the way, Charlie Hune
Right, Charlie. He
was
sang with
in
Humble
touch with
Pie for a
Rob.
bit. Yeah.
He did in a band called Victory in Europe, which was, a metal band, pretty popular. And of course, he sang with Ted Nugent quite, with after Derek St. Holmes. And so Roger called me and said, I think I got a singer, that might, be able to cover Dave's material. And so I flew to New York and we did some rehearsals, and the booking agents came to the SIR and he said, yeah, we think it works. And so once again, I gave my notice at Molly Hatchet. So
Again.
yeah, they were gracious about it. I think they were a little upset, but they were gracious about it. I mean, I had a much more vested interest in being in Foghat than in Molly Hatchet. I was sort of a sideman, and Foghat I was a partner. So that's a big difference. And it was much more my style of music, blues rock. I mean, I really love playing Southern rock, and I love guitar harmonies and everything. But my core root is blues rock. From
So Allman Brothers, that kind of stuff.
yeah, Allman Brothers, and then the guys, all the John Mayall people, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, all the great guitar players, that
Did you
basically
ever,
took American blues and plugged it into Marshall amplifiers and
did you ever get
back us.
did you ever get to be friends with like Brian May and Roger Taylor at all?
No, I have met them, but I never became, close enough to be friendly with them. A good friend of ours played bass with them, and who plays with Blue Oyster Cult, and so I met them through him, but more of just a hello, nice to meet you kind of a thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
because their bassist was always John Deacon.
Right. And after,
Freddie passed.
Freddie died, he pretty much disappeared, of his own volition, of
Right,
course.
he disappeared, right.
Yeah, he just, retired really. And he wrote some of their biggest hits, so I'm sure he was
And
financially.
Brian-
Who's the bass player for Blue Oyster Cult now? The
Uh,
current?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but
For a
the one
while, the guy that played with Todd Rundgren for a bit played the bass with them,
exactly right. Yeah.
which
Yeah,
I can't remember his
my
name.
memory's failing me, but it'll hit me in a minute or
Yeah,
two.
yeah. So over the 27 years, there was a lot of changes. How do you like the current Foghat lineup? Of course, we have the original drummer and yourself. How's this new singer?
I think this is my favorite version,
Okay,
barring playing with Lonesome Dave, which was sort of irreplaceable in my mind and
I agree.
memory. But as far as what we've been doing lately, I mean, I love the guys I'm with now. Scott Holt played, over a decade with Buddy Guy.
Okay,
So we've actually gone in a little bit more of a bluesy direction, more like the original band sound because of his blues influence. And Rodney O'Quinn, our bass player, played with Pat Travers for many years. So I mean,
oh,
there's that Pat Travers connection again with me and
Again, yeah.
and we had a #1 blues record last year. Our album Sonic Mojo debuted at #1 on the Billboard Blues charts. So that was really encouraging. That doesn't happen a lot with legacy bands these days.
Right, no doubt.
And
Yeah.
it was on the charts for 30 some weeks. So that was
Okay.
exciting for us. And
Yes.
we just love playing together and recording together. So, keeps everything fresh and we're like a family. I mean, it's nothing better than having your best friends be in the band.
That's awesome.
It's not like a job. It's like something we look forward to getting together every show we can.
That's how we feel about this podcast. It's not a job. It's more of
Something we enjoy doing.
right.
Yeah, right. And that's the best kind of work there is, when it
It is.
doesn't feel like work at all.
No.
And then how is you just finished part of the tour and you got a next leg coming up. How is the touring with Nazareth?
Oh, it's great. And I met them years ago when I was a Molly Hatchet. I did shows with them in Europe. Just a great bunch of guys, the
Okay.
Scottish guys are funny. Pete's the band leader now. I knew them back when Dan was still alive, their lead
Yep.
singer. But he unfortunately passed a couple years ago. But they have a great new singer who I just met, but we hit it off famously. Really nice guy named Gianni.
Okay.
Great singer, and the shows have been selling really well. So it's a great bill. I mean, Nazareth and Foghat. If you're a fan of one, you're probably a fan of the other. So
For sure.
we're
For
right in the
sure.
same ballpark, and the shows have been going great, and they're just
Good.
great people to hang out with, and it's very low key and fun, and all about the music.
Do you have somebody that you have wanted to play with but never got to?
Yes, Jeff Beck.
I was just gonna say Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
That's a that's just what I was thinking. Jeff
Yeah.
Beck.
Yeah, he was a step above everybody else
He was.
on many different levels. And I never even got to meet him. So, Roger knew him, and but yeah, unfortunately for me, one of my real heroes.
Yeah, without
That's
a
the
doubt.
first, the old one with the green apple on it, Beckola. That's
Yeah.
the first, that's every time I get a new phone or a new anything, that's the first record that goes on there, the Rod
Great
Stewart and
record.
Ronnie Wood and
Yeah, Ronnie Wood, Rod Stewart,
Ronnie Wood
fantastic.
played with
Mickey
Jeff Beck?
Hawkins
Yeah,
playing on there.
yeah, that
I
was
didn't know that.
fantastic.
Hmm.
Before we wrap it up, Brian, and thanks for coming on with us. Anything else you want to plug?
Well, I say, for all your Foghat needs, go to foghat.com. We have lots of merch, and every time we get a new tour date, it goes right up there. So, you know, we're pretty much firing on all cylinders playing live, and especially with Nazareth, it's a great bill. So if you get a chance to see one of these shows, that's great.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll
that's
be
pretty much
seeing
it.
you
We're
guys
going to
on
probably have
May
two new releases in
23rd.
the next year or so. We're working on a studio record,
Okay,
and we'll probably have a live album out before that,
Which,
featuring some deeper tracks that don't usually get on the live performances. So
okay.
which ironically, it's funny because Ronnie Wood is working on an album as we speak with Stones.
Oh yeah, the Stones got a new record coming
yeah,
out too,
right.
as
Yeah,
you've
and
heard.
so they're out. I just saw Ronnie Wood on one of the late night shows, and
Right.
he's
Fallon.
yeah, and he's quite the artist as well. So
Hmm.
apparently, during his interview, he was talking about an art show in some museum, I think in Germany, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
Yeah, he loves painting. And I saw since I'll be coming to see you guys in a couple weeks, I looked at the set list. I see you put on Road Fever again and Fool for the City, which obviously are two of the best of many songs by Foghat that are,
yeah, that's always the challenge for us every year
yeah,
because we have a lot of people come see us, every year, and we want to play some different songs for them so they don't hear the same set. So Honey Hush is in there sometimes, Third Time Lucky.
oh, nice. Okay.
We do It Hurts Me Too. That's always, it's a standard blues song, of course, but Dave did a fantastic version of it, and so did
He
Scott.
did. He did.
And it's a great song for me. It's a great slow blues song.
And of course,
But yeah, we
Laura's
try to
got to be
change
in
up the
there.
set. We had Hole to Hide in, and there's so many songs to choose from. So we've been sort of leaning, we're at a time period now where we're at anniversaries of the original record releases. So we're sort of, whatever record it happens to be, I think it's Night Shift at the moment, released in this particular, 20-year period, 20-year anniversary, then we'll use that as the source for some of the deep tracks.
And
So
that's a great album, great song, Night
yeah,
Shift. I love it.
and we always on our Facebook page, we always ask the fans what songs they like to hear, and that always plays into what we play.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you in a couple weeks, and thank you very much for coming on.
All
We
right, my
really
pleasure.
appreciate it and a great interview. Thank you.
Oh, glad to do it. You guys rock on.
Thank
Rock
you.
on. Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.